James Gunn he's really walking some fine lines with this. Creature Commandos episodes 6, I think 6, penultimate episode. It's weird to me that they're going to wrap this up next episode for the season. Although maybe they're not. I think it's already been confirmed it's getting a second season, so maybe it won't wrap up. I don't know. But it's good. The show is still good. There's one aspect of this that does something that I generally don't like, but justifies its use of that trope and handles it about as well as it was going to be handled. And I'll get to that. It's continuing down a line with Eric that I think is good and needs to be held. Again, reminding us like this guy is the worst. Like, I don't want to dwell on Eric because he's only got one scene in this. There was a line he had that just says everything about him, which is that after brutally murdering these two passengers on this private jet, he tells the pilot, now, I'm paraphrasing, but do the thing that you were born to do and play your small part in my story. Whew. That line goes real hard because it says everything about how he views the world. He views it only as his story, and everyone else is just a supporting player in his narrative. He doesn't see anybody else as full people. The only thing they are there to do is to play their part in his story. Oh boy. I really dislike Eric, but in a way that is very clearly very purposeful. I'm supposed to not like him, and it's working. So that's good. I like the stuff that is done with Weasel on this. It's really cute and really sweet. The stuff with him and the wolves and his decision to go back to the castle. I don't think they're trying to actually imply that the princess is the grown-up child who died. But I think they're just pulling on the general resemblance, same color eyes, same color hair, and that's what pulls him back. And I think it works for that because otherwise, I would say Weasel of all the characters is the one who you would go, if he broke away from the group, why would he come back? Well, here's a reason. And given the flashback that we got with him, I buy it. So that works. So let's talk about the thing that had elements that can go very wrong for me, but I think we're done about as well as they can be done, and my praise goes to that. Dr. Phosphorus' backstory. We've got a handful of things that I can be very touchy about, but again, it's always worth remembering most of the stuff I don't like, except for where I say this is just a matter of taste, like with cringe stuff. If you like cringe, great. I can't stand it. But other than simply matters of taste, most of the stuff that I do not like is not because the inherent notion of the thing is bad. It's because it's generally, it's either because it's badly overused or most of the instances where it does get used, it is done poorly. Here we have a number of things that I frequently see done in a way that do not feel like they properly justify things. And here it clicked for me. So let's start with the death of his family. Now, I have railed in other places about, against other things about needless cruelty. And I do distinguish between a cruelty of characters and a cruelty of narrative. And the main thing for me most of the time with that is it strikes me as cruel when there was no need for that to happen. But what happens to Dr. Phosphorus' family did need to happen. And it needed to happen as one of two parts to manage to pull off something else that I frequently don't like. Because I generally kind of balk at the person loses everything, becomes a monster as a result of that. As if grief makes us wicked. And, that notion is why I kind of chafe against it a lot of the time. But the thing is here, and especially with the way he's animated, like you can see the pain in his face, and Alan Tudyk is putting a lot of pain and fear in his voice. I can buy especially since I have at this point already seen the kind of person he became. I can buy that between losing his family and what happened to him physically, that he would become what he is. Because at that point, what else does he have? What else is he going to do? What else is there for him to do? The people he cared about are gone. He can't live a normal life. He doesn't have a lot of reason to just even attempt an ordinary existence. And he doesn't really have any reason to be kind, frankly. And not that I'm saying, I want more characters like this. I don't, but I do feel like this is one of the better justifications of a family man turned monster. Because between the 1-2 punch of those two things happening, yeah, I buy it. Also, we get Rupert Thorne. That was a fun pull. I haven't thought about Rupert Thorne in ages. And then it also does another thing that normally I would decry, but I'm so glad it wasn't on screen. It is very clear, as we hear in the newscast, Dr. Phosphorus killed not only Thorne, but his family, his wife and kids. Again, especially at that particular point, this was the first place he went after he, was fully transformed. His family is dead. I believe that at that point, he would do that. But I really appreciate that even though the thought crosses his mind in the present day for him to kill that little girl, that even though that idea crosses his mind, that he doesn't follow through. I think that's a big part of why this is working for me with Dr. Phosphorus. And by contrast, I'll sort of explain why it often doesn't work for me. Where things frequently fall apart for me with someone has a massive loss and becomes a monster or supervillain or what have you, is that I can sometimes buy the immediate response to a severe trauma or a severe loss. I could buy that Dr. Phosphorus, no matter what kind of man he was before, that in that moment, after what happened to his family and the way that he was treated by Thorne and his goons, when he has the chance to pay Thorne back in full for what he did, that he would do it in that moment. But I like that, despite the fact that he still has that thought, he doesn't hurt that girl. And not just because I would have found that very cruel, and it wouldn't have told us anything we didn't already know about him because we already knew he killed kids. But what this tells me is, since that time, since that initial rage that drove him, that's not necessarily who he needs to be or who he's going to push himself to be. Now, does that make him a good guy? No. But this is the kind of, after the initial burst of rage that drove him to do what he did, he's settled a little and he hasn't become good, but he's not at that same 11. Because that's what drives me bonkers about heel turns, especially for superheroes, for characters like Hal Jordan and whatnot. A big part of the reason that stuff like that doesn't work, especially if you try and keep them ongoing as a villain after that, is even if I buy that in this moment, they are so angry, upset, whatever, that they will do something horrible, the idea that they will never come down from that place, that's what I generally don't buy. A lot of times when shows try and give this kind of backstory to a villain or turn a good person bad. And I feel like this is balanced in a way I almost never see with a character like that. And it's really well done. Plus we get some fun stuff like him going to the club and dancing with his gang with their glow-in-the-dark skull tattoos. And they're like, yeah, that's fun. And again, I buy that. He might be over the rage in that moment, but he has to find some way to find enjoyment, and he opts for that. Again, I buy it. It tracks here in a way that I often feel like other shows, comics, movies, etc. don't do the legwork to justify this kind of character trajectory for a villainous character. And I think it's done much better here. So the brothel. This, it's trying. It's well-meaning. But it is falling into ultimately not only objectifying the sex workers, but putting them as the subject of violence in order to establish other people as bad. Regardless of how much it attempts to humanize or be on their side, it is still doing what narratives have been doing to sex worker characters since time immemorial. Like, this is what sex workers in these situations are there for narratively, for titillation and brutalization. And while this is hardly the most brutal that I've seen happen to sex worker characters, it's still here. And while it is revenged, it still happened in the first place. And this is a situation where, even though it's far from the most egregious that I've seen, this is one where I'm like, this needs to just stop. It needs to just stop. Look, if you are specifically going to tell a sex worker's story, okay, maybe. But like, when you're just throwing them in to a story to be sexy and then get beat up, just don't. Just stop. And I wanted to like, the characters in the brothel. The voice actress, I can never remember her name. I'll put it up here. Who voices the madam. She has one of my favorite voices in the history of film and television. I love her voice so much. And it was great to hear her. And she puts a lot behind that performance. And I like that character. But she also just gets brutalized. Just because you are having the beat up hookers saved by a couple of women who don't expect sex in as a reward doesn't really fix the other problems. Yes, having men sweep in to save the brutalized hookers and the sort of dynamic inherent with doing that has problems that you have managed to move past, but just changing them to women doesn't fix all of the problems with doing this. The other problems are still there. I've done longer pieces talking about depictions of sex workers before, and I'm just at a point where find something else to do with them. If you're gonna have them there, find something else to do. You know what? I'll even give you a pass on the titillization. If you want to have sex workers there just for a little bit of titillization in a scene, just to titillate the audience, and I'm just fixating on the word titillate. Yeah, if you want to titillate, like, fine. Some people might get turned off by that. As long as it doesn't feel deeply exploitative, and it's animation, so that helps. No actual actress had to strip down for this, so that helps a little. Like, I'll even let you have that. But stop using them as a go-to to be brutalized. Just stop. Just stop. We have so much of this already. It's just find somebody else. Or, ask yourself, is it necessary that we actually brutalize a character at all? And if so, find somebody else. Just stop. Just stop doing it, please. Anyways, that was my one issue. Otherwise, good episode and well put together. And I'm really curious as to whether or not they are going to try and wrap it up in the next episode. And if so, how? At this point, it seems really clear that Flag is not going to be present. I'm guessing he's going to wake up and have some kind of realization about what's going on. Maybe he's going to go for Cersei because she's still in custody. I don't know. But we'll see next week. Creature Commandos, penultimate episode of season 1. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now it's time to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lutfula,
Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Renobulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam RDL Taylor, Pal Barabajoggle, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. You can hear me try and say your name while dealing with these guys crawling all over me by checking out the reward tiers on my Patreon. See you next time.